Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. I hope I'm audible to everyone. Just to be sure, am I audible to everyone?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, great. So, welcome once again to the session. I'm Kelvin. I'm delighted to welcome you all here. I know how important this session is to all of us, and so I was very excited to take up this workshop so we could have a very great prep ahead of WUDC and other regional majors that haven't happened yet. And so, right from the bat, I would say this that we need to take the manual for this year a bit more seriously than we have previously, because I think we have reached a point where certain things we will discuss have become very, very essential to the point where things that were encouraged, for example, are now being asked to be done at all costs. And so it really calls for more introspection on our end. And for once, there are actual penalties to not obeying the rules. So I'm excited. I think you're excited too. Let's just get into the video now. And so the topic for today's workshop is decoding the updates to the Sofia WUDC manual. And I will be your host. My name is Kelvin. I'll be serving on CAP for Worlds next year. And for Worlds this year, I'll be on training team. And so please be excited for the new training events we have coming into Sofia, and be assured for a great WUDC next year. The purpose of this workshop is to get into what the changes of the manual exactly are, what these changes exactly mean, and what it means for anyone who wants to continue debating and judging BP. And so I think we should be good to go. Why are we having this? We are going to get into what changed and get into the logic of why this changed. Now, here I'll issue a quick disclaimer that these may not be exactly the thought process of the CA team verbatim, but these are per my experience as a debater and conversations that we've had on forums, what this is most likely inspired by, and how it affects how we debate or judge BP debates. And we will then go into some clear examples of what modern or 2025 debate practice looks like if it's good, and what it looks like if it's bad. So this session would capture the 7 capstone areas that the new manual is dealing with, which is how we are going about actor motions. We will also get into a tidbit about what counts as good counterprop, how we are dealing with alternative motions, what to do with abusive concessions, what the new idea of whipping in debate looks like, and what paneling looks like, especially in disagreements, and POIs, then AI lastly. So let's get into it then. So actor motions then. Let's get into our actor motion. An example of an actor motion is this house as person A would do action B, or this house as entity A would do action B. And so I think it's very clear what these should be from the start for most of us, because most of us have kind of interacted with BP before. And so it says very clearly here that the key idea is you are debating from the actor's point of view, not your own. And so it means that A, for the purposes of the debate, no matter how invalid, what we are taking as truth is what the actor thinks, what the actor believes. And we have to also assume that with the environment the actor is in, the actor knows good information and the actor can be persuaded to change. And so I think to make this clearer, the actor may have some predispositions, but I think that the point at which we are having a debate about what an actor should do or what an actor would most likely do is a point where we come to the consensus then that the actor is more likely going to take either action. Well, unless the motion is so bad that the actor has no choice, I think that there is good reason then to believe and make the panel then also believe that the actor is most likely going to take either choice. Again, the actor is not stupid and cannot be tricked. This is even true for actors who are uneducated for the purposes of the debate. They have information and they can be persuaded otherwise, but they cannot be completely fooled by information you know. The next thing then is how it affects how we are going to debate actor debates from here on. An example of a bad argument to make looking into the future would be in a motion about private universities. Given the motion, this House, as the Minister of Education, would ban private universities. A bad argument, for example, would be to say that, well, the minister doesn't really know about private universities, or he does not really have an idea about how they work in the very first place. A good argument would probably be that the minister cares about access, or the minister cares about giving education to as many people as possible. So any policy or any institution that widens the persisting inequality is something that the minister will most likely kick against. This is very clear. Another example, if there is a debate, for example, about the Catholic Church and controversially so contraception, and you are in the round, a bad argument to make would be that the Pope, for example, does not find himself in any situation where he would need contraception, so he probably has no idea how this works. That cannot be the case. Once the actor is taking an action, you have to assume that the actor is knowledgeable about it. So looking into why this was done, I reckon it's because people were abusing what judges know, what judges don't know, to then make debates a bit too jargony, make debates a bit too reliant on so many assumptions that we could not even verify at any point in time. And so now that if you share a MEC, if you share information from opening, everybody has to assume that the actor knows that information. The debate then sticks to the core of what an actor debate is supposed to be about, which is, if the actor even knew this, will they care? I know there is some consent. I checked into the Q&A when the new manual was released, and people were bothered that, oh, well, it makes the debate too cumbersome. Not exactly. A lot of people do things actually with knowledge of consequence. A lot of people do things with knowledge of the other world, and they still do it either way. So, for example, I am um if I am Hindu and you tell me about the Bible, I may have that information, but you cannot be certain that once I have it, by all means, I will change my religion. I may have my convictions for which I wouldn't, but some people have converted from, say, Hindu to Islam or Hindu to Christianity and vice versa. It means then that we can still have good actor debates, just that nobody can then say something that is so new that nobody can engage. And instead of debating what the actor would do, we would now waste our time debating what the actor knows and what the actor doesn't. That doesn't make for a progressive actor debate, in my opinion. Example 2. This house, as the feminist movement, would support banning beauty pageants. The bad way to go about it is that, well, these activists, having been someone who, for the purposes of the debate, is obviously anti these pageants, does not really know how beneficial it is and how great it is for people. The good way to go about this is to say that even if the actor knows about this and how they empower some women, they have some other reasons. For example, how they emphasize systemic harm, how they make it more difficult for a lot more women outside the pageantry space to be able to get some self-actualization. So this becomes, on scope then, a bigger issue that the feminists would care about, i.e. the collective over just a few women who get to self-liberate. I think that should be great. And so you cannot unknow an information for an actor, but you can simply explain that if the actor knew this, they will not take the decision. So, for example, if a corrupt politician paid you $1 million to not attend this workshop, you will most likely not be here. Elcom will probably not be here as well. And so this is just an instance where we know for sure then that people would take certain decisions if they have certain options. Saying that, oh, they don't have it, they don't know this, does not really do a lot for the debate, because if they have it and they know it, what then does it do for us anyway? So let's get into the next part, which is alternative motions, or motions that are worded differently. So this house celebrates X, this house regrets X, this house hopes X, this house condemns X, and my nemesis and my bane in BP debating, this house welcomes X. I didn't know this at the time. When I was prepping for the Vietnam WUDC ESL final, but at least it's clear now then that these motions are treated as support or opposed debates based off of what the word that is being used is closest to. Now, this requires a bit of basic grammar grasping, right? You need to be good at your grammar, in the very least, to know that to condemn something means to fundamentally, at its core, oppose it. But once you know those things, you should be good. So let's get into the example then. This house celebrates the rise of African fintech startup. So if you celebrate something, I would assume that it means that you support that thing happening. Or controversially so, you don't really support it, but you support the outcomes that come out of that phenomenon or out of that event happening. For the purposes of the future of BP, you are to treat this as a support debate. And so OG in this motion argues why this is great. So, for example, helps in development, helps in inclusion and innovation. And OO would argue the problems, basically opposite, why it may deepen inequality, why the African market perhaps is not having enough good regulation to hold this up. Please note that that is not my opinion. I'm not the one saying the African market does not have it. I'm just saying that that's an argument someone could run if they're interested in that. And so that should be very clear. Example 2, this house condemns the use of AI in warfare. And so to that very extent, I think it plays the same role then. To condemn is to oppose something fundamentally. And so OG argues why AI was immoral, destabilizing, and dangerous, and why more people would probably be killed. Even though we have less soldiers, for example, on the battlefield, the casualties get higher. Or argue why casualties on the end of some individuals would get higher, given that we can now do, for example, targeted strikes and more precise strikes, etc. And so this is an example of how it looks like. I think it is clear then, if the House hopes for something, it means the House supports that thing happening. And so they should make it very clear. Why was this part of the manual changed? Because in many times, people used to argue what a celebration is, the semantics of what to condemn means. Is it that we are actually going out to condemn, or is it that we are condemning on a philosophical or moral level? People used to ask such questions a lot, and finally, the manual has made it clear as to what we should and we shouldn't do when we have such alternatively worded motions. So then we move to backloading. For the purposes of those who are new in debate, what is backloading? More so, definitional backloading. So I want to say that backloading, other things, is not expressly mentioned in the new manual, but I would say that as a very great person I am from a very moral perspective, I think that backloading is wrong. And as much as possible, you should try not to backload. And so what does backloading, a definition at its core, mean? This happens when the opposition delays challenging a prime minister's definition or the frame to a very late point, usually during DLO. So what happens is that sometimes PM's frame is contestable. Sometimes PM made a genuine mistake. LO pretends not to know about it at all and go about business as usual. Then DLO comes and drags the debate back to say, hello, this is what we meant, and we think PM has got it wrong. At this point, PM or OG has just 15 seconds through a single point of information to clarify their case or respond to the open opposition. And in my experience, and many times, this DLO especially if their younger speaker has been expressly told by their teammate not to dare take a POI, more so from opening government. This, in some few instances I've seen, have been the sole reasons why OG fell to OO. And while some of us had ideological leanings against backloading, we were not empowered to make any definitive action about such incidents when they occur. And so the manual now says a few things then. A, backloading is banned. You should not and cannot do that anymore. Secondly, if you want to challenge PM, it must at all costs be done in DLO speech. DLO cannot and should not introduce any new definitional challenges. For the sake of closing, member of OP may be able to do that during POI, but that POI obviously should be addressed to opening government. And this is not really something that should even be happening generally, because the idea of setting up the motion, setting up the round is usually the job for opening teams. But if closing feels then that they can not stand what's happening in the opening half, they can then do that, so as to have a very consistent debate. Let's then go into what the next part is. I think I have explained why backloading is bad, especially because of how unfairly it contributes to why some opening opposition teams beat opening government teams. Let's get into counter-propping now. So counter-prop is simply what some of us call the alternative policy. And there are now very clear weighings up to what this is. And here, because of how counter-props mean dearly to me, I want to go ahead and explain why I think this is a very important addition to the BP manual. So the first one is something we all know already to some extent, which is that when you are opposing a policy, you have equal resources at best or fewer, really. So if OG would spend $5 million in cash for a project, if OO has an alternative, OO has to prove that it is also something we can achieve with $5 million in cash or less. Because, like, you know, if it's less, it means that we get the impact and also save money. But more so, these resources would be the same type. So, for example, you cannot use more political capital than OG. You cannot redirect public will into government funding by saying that, for example, OG says, well, they take $10 million in funding. You say, oh, well, the people want to pay the tax, and that public will that we have is one that would generate so much money. That is wrong and should not be done. The resources should be of the same type. So if we need physical food items, and maybe the debate is that we should feed that to the unhoused, your alternative cannot be that, oh, well, instead of the food, let's, you know, sell the food and get money and convert. Once the food is converted to money, we can then use the money to take care of the homeless or the unhoused. That cannot be the case. An example of a valid counter-prop would be that we have this food, but well, let's give it to people who are hungry in the hospital, or let's give it to disaster victims, right? So that is an example of how it looks like. It has to be same or less in value and be of the same type. So think about it this way. I feel like the best way to visualize counter props is to see it as we are in the Parliament House and we have to debate something that has been brought to the floor of Parliament. If it's $10 million we've gotten from the Chinese government, if it is 2 million barrels of gold or diamonds, we have to use that to achieve that end. In Parliament, we assume the resources are this. And I know one could say, oh, but sometimes it's debated before we get the money. Unfortunately, BP debates, especially those that require counter props or that have counter props being allowed to be set by the other team, already say that feasibility is assumed. So it cannot be that we are now going to hunt. It is that we already have the resources to be able to achieve that. And so that should not be up to conversation in the very least. The second strict test that you must comply to under the Sofia WUDC debating manual is it should be the same area or policy goal. So, for example, if the motion is that we would ban crypto trading, OG has to ban crypto trading. OO has to do the classic, either explaining why a ban would be worse, using the classic, and frankly overused black market argument, or they can just counterprop regulating crypto. You cannot say that, oh, instead of wasting your time on crypto, let's go and care about boys' mental health because, these boys are using the crypto to help their mental health, or let's use it to invest in STEP. What we generally do in real life, where we say instead of politicians to do this, they are doing this. The debates, unfortunately, now says that something must be done in that very sector at all costs. The debate is then, what are we doing in that very sector? I shouldn't have to add that it should be mutually exclusive of the other side, blah, blah, blah. So, knifing. Knifing is when a team, usually closing team, undermines, reverses, contradicts, or sometimes even rebuts things that their own benchmates have said. It means that attacking your own side arguments. And the reason it is coined as knifing is because it's literally a knife. Because OG expected you in CG to be a homie, to be a bro, and you're now doing what OP is supposed to do. That's like stabbing a bro in real life. Hence why we call that knifing. An example, OG says, well, this policy is great because it increases equality. CG says, oh no, this policy increases inequality, but we still don't mind. This is still a knife that you don't mind what it does with the equality doesn't mean you've not rebutted OG. So this is very clear. So now, let me just answer these questions. A, if your opening team says something very ridiculous and they say something that is anti or counter to the motion, I think it is intuitive to already know that the opening team is on its grounds losing the debate, not placing fourth automatically. Let's get that right. But they are not going to place really great generally. And so saying what the motion demands is not knifing your opening because you get it. The motion demands what it demands. That is not up to you. Knifing is when you do it on your own volition, usually to gain some sort of strategic advantage. So if you knife, of course, the penalty is that judges have to treat what you said like they never heard it. And so that affects your team. Because if you spend 3 minutes rebutting your opening, rebutting your opening, it will end up pretty terribly for you on the comparison. Let's get into abusive concession. So an abusive concession is when an opening team makes a random, irrelevant, last-minute statement to block closing. So these are two conditions. You must be able to reasonably assume that this is to block closing. And secondly, you must also be able to reasonably assume that this is something that they are doing to hurt closing or their bench, but does not really benefit their case. Like, you think about it and you ask yourself, okay, if we take this as true, does it help your team win the debate? If the answer is no, it means then that it's an abusive concession. So, for example, if we have a case where another team says, or opening government then comes to say that, oh, well, closing cannot argue this because in that case, they will be knifing us. So I'm going to use that concrete example. So closing, for example, cannot argue that the G20 cannot become 23, or they cannot argue that we can still do it with the US because without the US, sorry, because then that would be a knife on our team. So you agree essentially with what opening says, the other opening team. Realize that it doesn't help your case if your closing cannot extend you, and it's unclear what exactly you're trying to achieve with that. Another way this looks like is if you try to ask a POI sometimes. You usually ask it to member of UP if you're OG or upward to try to undermine CG. Sometimes they do it in their last speeches as well. It doesn't bind the closing team. Second, it does not count for your material. Third, as with knifing, judges would act like they never heard it. Now, I know it's a bit difficult as a judge to unhear, something you clearly heard and wrote. But I think that over time, we get used to it. We just have to keep the provisions of the manual in mind, and we will be good in no time. Does this rule apply to weighing if we are weighing in a round? Definitely not, because weighing is something that advances your case. We need to think about something that does not advance your own case. So if opening weighs in a way that preempts closing or blocks closing, if that new thing is something that, or that weighing something that's advancing the OG case, that's fine. We only do not like it if it's new or random or irrelevant or introduced late or explicitly, as is usually done, really used to block another team. Let's go to the favorite part. Everyone who knew me the time I was actually debating, knows that I do love trap POIs. I love POIs generally, and I love traps. So imagine like having the two of them together. Can you still ask trap POIs? It was real life. We will probably have a drum roll at this point if we could still have trap POIs. And the answer is yes. You can still have trap POIs. So trap POIs are used to bait an opening team into making a concession that binds their closing. This usually looks like yes or no questions that really do not have a very clear answer. In my experience, some of them, if you say yes, you're in trouble. If you say no, you're in trouble. Some of them, if you even ignore the POI or stay in the middle, you are still in trouble. So yes, you can still beat opening teams, but closing teams are not bound to it anyway. So you can succeed with trapping opening to make an unstrategic concession. But instead of those days where once you trick opening, you know that you've gotten the whole bench essentially, because like closing teams cannot come and do anything contrary to what opening said. Unfortunately, the new manual says it's fine. They can contradict their opening if it is something that was not done properly. So yeah, so the same conditions. Was opening made to make a concession that hurt CG alone or closing alone? If yes, closing can contradict you. Secondly, does not advance the opening team's own case. It would affect OG, but it will not affect CG because obviously it's by design or in our own thought that OG felt it would be great to give such an answer to a POI for which he gave it. That it's good, if that is good for OG, does not mean it's good for CG. So I think the time is now in an era where OG teams pay for their sins alone. And frankly, that is great, especially as CG is the hardest role to date to have in many circuits. I think save the African circuit in a few. Consistency rules. So this is just to make it very clear. You are not obliged to follow an abusive concession, but you must still be consistent with other consistent or true to debate opening team material and the core framework on the bench. So you don't have to say, hey, they did this, so you are taking advantage of that to knife them. That is still not allowed. Offensive whipping. My second favorite. So the manual says, and before that, allow me to say this. I'm hosting the workshop, so you have to listen at all costs. The idea that whips have to be a second member in terms of explaining everything the member said right again is one that genuinely needs to be worked on in the circuit, on the community, right? If you wanted to hear my teammate's speech again, you might as well record it and then adjust the manual for whips to do maybe just 3 minutes of new rebuttals. Then you use the rest of the 4 minutes to fast forward my teammate's speech. It's a whole new speech. And so if whips have especially new responsive material, let them run it, right? So you cannot stop them from running those new things. This is very clear, right? So if the whip is making something and tries to sometimes frame it as a response to something that was never raised, that they said it's a response to another point, does not mean it automatically becomes a responsive material. It must respond to something that was already discussed in the round. I think this is pretty clear. Must seal still follow O's counterprop? Yes. Seal cannot move beyond O's counterprop. So for example, if OO says regulation instead of ban, CO must actually defend this and extend within it. So for example, new impacts, new stakeholders, and even though it's the same policy, slightly different MEC. Please note the policy is different from the MEC. So heavy regulations look like so many things. Some may want to do it through law and punishment. Some may want to use task forces and stuff like that. So different MEC, but same policy. So closing can still extend. Now let's go to judging. And I want to raise my voice slightly here so we are a bit clear on what the adjudication core says. If there are cyclical calls, somebody has OG, sometimes all 4 panels do not, all 4 or all 3 or all 5 panels do not really have a consistent, sometimes even first or second. Vote on every pair. When we say every pair, 3 teams. sorry, two teams. A pair is two. There's a pair of fingers. For those who can see that, there's like two fingers, right? Or two fists, a pair. So OGOO, OGCG, CGOO, CGCO, OOCO, then OGCO, right? All these comparisons must be done independently. Then you agree on those we all agree with. Then those we have concessions with, all of that. Now, at the end of this, then, if the chair loses the vote, the chair can give the OA now. It's not automatically that the panelists have to give the OA. If the chair feels like, well, they disagreed with the call, but, well, there's a great way in which they see the angle the panelists are coming from, the chair can still give the OA if they want. If the chair cannot or does not find any good reason or has difficulties justifying that kind of call, the chair can invite a member of the panel to do part or all of the OA. So part means that if the chair and the panel agreed on, let's say, OGOO, the chair can do that, but for the rest, one of them can be invited to do that. But please note that if the panelist declines or none of the people who splitted against you declines to give the OA, you as chair still has to give the OA. You cannot choose not to do that. I know this is a bit controversial because then panelists could, the times where you are with panelists, they want to split, and then once they know, hey, they have to give the OA, they back out. So this used to allow the chairs some power, given that in some instances or most instances, the chairs are rather the better judges. People expressed concern that this new manual will make it easier for rogue panelists to just vote out of interest. And now they know that they have no accountability on them. They can do what they want. The Arch Core is really conversant with this. And so in light of this, I would encourage anyone here who gets to see it every now and then to be at least more intentional about allocations, since some of these things cannot be changed. POIs. POIs, you have to take at least one POI per speaker. So you can't say, oh, I will not take, but my teammate will take. Not at all. You have to take a POI if you are offered. So if POIs were offered and you didn't take it, you have your engagement reduced, you have penalties. So what does that penalty look like? A, you would reduce your speaker scores, adjust margins. So maybe even if you are first, we can reduce the gap between you and somebody. And sometimes you can even flip very close calls. If you are not really sure about the comparison between your team and another team, and we realize you didn't take a POI, we would place that team over you. This does not mean you'll be forced, right? Sometimes none of you really take POIs, but it means that your speech becomes less persuasive. And judges, first thing is that you don't really need to explain to speakers all the time that you did this, unless it affects the call, because you don't have to explain your speaker scores, for example. Secondly, judges, please note that the manual says you can give one or more of this, because sometimes adjusting the penalty of the speaker scores means that you will have to flip a call anyway. So don't worry about that part of it. I think that judges should comply with this. Any bad habits that has persisted in debating as we know it has only persisted because there is no consequence. If judges do not take this seriously, nothing will change. Cutting POIs. Now, 1 second, I think this has been clear for time. You are free to cut the POI. The 15 seconds is not for the person asking the POI. The 15 seconds is part of your speech. So if you believe you've heard enough, or you've heard 1 point, it's a point of information, but sometimes people used to want to ask 10 points and they speak so fast. Once you've heard 1 point, you can stop. But if you cut someone off, so for example, if someone says, what do you think about or do you think Zoran Mamdani is communist, for example? You can stop the person there. That's 1 point. That's 1 point of information that has been asked clearly. So you can stop the person there. Don't need to continue. But the person say, do you think Zoran Mamdani is air? And you cut it. Oh, yes, I know you're going to say he's the communist, but he is not, or he is blah, blah, blah. No, you have cut the POI. Maybe the POI was, do you think Zoran Mamdani is a great rapper? Because Zoran used to be a rapper. You've really cut the conversation. And so predictive response, you're not AI, right? You cannot be given predictive responses. Wait for at least 1 point to be made. If you cut somebody before they make 1 point, you will be taken as you didn't take a POI, and all these penalties would apply to you. This is so that speakers do not really pretend that, oh, POI, say, oh, you're wasting my time. That's one thing speakers like doing a lot. Or, oh, sit down. Once you apply to take a POI, or once you commit to doing that, you have to do it. So if you received a POI late, nobody asked you, that's fine, right? Or if in the early time somebody asked you, but you said you take later, they didn't ask again. Or if you ask for a POI, nobody offers you a POI, that is fine. To the favorite, POI preferences. Now, this is not about preferences that are in special cases. These are general preferences. So saying, oh, you will not take POI from this person, or you're angry at this person, you can say it though, but it doesn't count. And judges do not have to do that, right? So if you're asking a POI every 15 or 30 seconds, somebody cannot appeal to you as a judge to say that, oh, but judge, I said I will not take it. No. People should ask POIs as normal. Just don't badger and all of that. Ask POIs. If they say they'll take closing only, you can still ask. They cannot stop you. Once again, it's based of our consciousness that these rules work. So let's be conscientized about that. Lastly, on AI, please don't use AI. I believe in you. I think you are smarter than AI. Hold your hold somewhere, I don't know. Hold your hand to your chest, like I'm doing here, and say, I, and you mention your name, shall not use AI because, I don't know, because not AI is not as good as I or me. Don't use AI. Please don't. Especially those who are allowed to use digital note takers. Please do not use AI. It's not a great look for us. And yeah, let's try to keep debates creative. Let's try to keep debates human as much as possible. So we are done with the workshop now. Are there any questions? Any questions? I saw someone ask if we'll share the slide. Yes, Othniel will share the slide. Is there any other question?
I have a question regarding the knifing and the OGOO clash. Is it, sorry, OGCG, the same side clash? In case
Yeah.
in case the closing side of I do not agree with my opening to a huge extent, or probably my opening has given a very shitty framing or a policy. in that case, as a closing, what power do I have, and how to frame it or how to go it such that it doesn't look like knifing or look like a completely new, different policy?
Yes. So, well, I think that the way to answer this, unfortunately, ends up being a bit unethical. So, I cannot be seen, promoting such. But I think that it's as simple as ask yourself genuinely, is this a knife? If it's not a knife, go for it. If it is, please don't do it. Because you may succeed in not making it look like a knife, but doesn't change the fact that it is. And we don't re-adjudicate. So to stay on the safer side, please don't address a new policy as, try to frame it as something. Because like I said, you need to contradict OG to do that. And so ask yourself, is it really worth my time? Yeah, I think that's the first thing. Is it really worth my time doing this? If not, please don't do it. Or if it is, then you can explain that OG is off. And sometimes you can do it by going into how O and C are struggling to engage, and now convince the panel then that your frame was the better one in which both of them could have. But as that's with O and counterprop, please ask it in a POI to OO so they can also engage. Yeah. Is there any other question? Okay, I see in the chat. The slides would be sent to you.
Hey, I had a doubt. Can I ask?
Yeah.
So my doubt is that if the opening half genuinely does not give enough framing or like enough characterization about something, which I think is very important for the debate, then can as like a member of OP or a member of GOV, can I bring in that new framing?
Yes, you can extend, you can expand the frame, you cannot contradict the frame, right? So if they say it is this, you can say, but panel, so someone says, oh, one thing we should know about India is that it's a big country. There are so many things to India that are more important for debating than the sheer size of the landmass of India. So that's adding to the debate. What you should not do is, for example, say that, well, India is not really big. India is a small country. I mean, unless that is the actual truth that can be proven very easily, do not contradict. You get it? Yeah. So I think there are no questions in the chat. Thank you everyone for joining the session. I think Car and OC will share the slide with you. I wish you all the best coming into tournaments, and I hope this session has been helpful to you all. See you another time. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kelvin, for sparing your time and for taking this really wonderful session. We would love to host all of you here who are a part of the workshop series at East India Pre-WUDC. If you have not registered already, make sure you register because we have a workshop series of 4 series lined up. This was the first workshop of the 4. You'll have 3 more, 2 of which are open access, including this one, and the rest 2 exclusive for participants. So what better reason to hop in?
Additionally, the slides would be provided, and this meet was YouTube live, which means it's recorded. So we'll be sharing the video link as well, so you can go through the video once again, the whole meet. Thank you, everyone. See you in East India Pre-WUDC.